The escape pod screamed through the asteroid field, metal groaning under the stress. Jake Carter gripped the controls as debris pelted the hull like gunfire. Behind him, the alien woman named Lyra pressed against the bulkhead, her violet eyes wide with something that looked like fear but felt like determination. "Left, go left!" she shouted over the alarms. Jake yanked the stick hard. A chunk of rock the size of a bus missed them by meters. Sweat poured down his face as he fought to keep them alive. The pod wasn't built for this kind of punishment. Neither was he. But here they were, running from her own people after she'd broken him out of their research facility. "Why did you do this?" he yelled. "Because they were going to kill you," Lyra said, her voice steady despite the chaos. "I couldn't let that happen." The pod shuddered violently. Warning lights painted the cramped space red. Jake could see the edge of the field ahead, open space where they might have a chance. Might being the key word. Lyra's people had warships, fast ones, and they'd be hunting for their escaped prize and the traitor who freed him. "There!" Lyra pointed at a gap between two spinning asteroids. "Through there! Quickly!" Jake didn't hesitate. He trusted her, which was insane considering they'd only known each other for 3 weeks. 3 weeks of her visiting his cell, asking questions about Earth, about humans, about him. 3 weeks of realizing that behind those alien features was someone who saw him as more than a specimen. They shot through the gap. The asteroids kissed the pod's shields, sending sparks cascading across the view screen. Then they were clear, tumbling into open space. Jake killed the engines and let them drift, hoping the debris field would mask their signature. Silence fell except for their heavy breathing. "They'll find us eventually," Jake said, checking the scanners. "This pod can't outrun their ships." Lyra moved closer. In the dim emergency lighting, her skin seemed to glow faintly, that strange bioluminescence her species had. She was beautiful in a way that shouldn't have made sense to his human brain, but it did. "I know a place," she said quietly. "A settlement on the outer rim. Humans live there. You'll be safe." "What about you?" "They'll execute you for this." "I know." She didn't look away from him. "It doesn't matter." Jake turned to face her fully. "It matters to me. You threw away everything. Your career, your family, your entire life. Why?" Lyra's hand reached out, hovering near his face but not quite touching, like she was afraid she'd break him. "Because in 3 weeks you showed me more kindness than I'd experienced in 30 years among my own people. Because when I asked about your world, you didn't just answer, you shared. Because you looked at me like I was a person, not just another alien." "You are a person," Jake said. "To you, yes. To them, I was always just a scientist. A tool. Useful but replaceable." Her hand finally touched his cheek, cool and gentle. "You made me feel alive." The scanner beeped. Jake's stomach dropped. 3 signatures coming fast through the asteroid field. "They found us," he said. Lyra pulled her hand back, her expression hardening into something fierce. "Then we run." Part 2. The settlement called Haven's Edge lived up to its name. Perched on a moon orbiting a gas giant at the very fringe of explored space, it existed in that lawless gap where neither human nor alien authorities bothered to enforce rules, perfect for people who needed to disappear. Jake and Lyra had made it there by the skin of their teeth, abandoning the dying escape pod for a cargo hauler whose captain asked no questions when Lyra paid him with her personal credit chip. The man, a grizzled human named Pete, had looked at them both and simply said, "Lovers on the run." Tale as old as time. He wasn't wrong, though. Jake hadn't fully admitted it to himself yet. Now they stood in a cramped apartment 3 levels below the surface, watching through a grimy window as ships came and went from the docking bays. The place smelled like recycled air in desperation, but it was safe. For now. "We need to blend in," Jake said, running a hand through his hair. "Your people will be looking for both of us." Lyra nodded, examining her reflection in a cracked mirror. Her appearance was distinctly non-human, the violet eyes and faint luminescence of her skin marking her as Valen. "I can use pigment suppressors for the glow. The eyes are harder." "Contacts," Jake suggested. "I saw a medical supply shop 2 blocks over. And then what?" Lyra turned to him. "We hide here forever. They won't stop searching." Jake sat on the edge of the narrow bed that dominated the small room. "I don't know. I'm making this up as I go." He looked up at her. "I never asked to be abducted from Earth. Never asked to be studied like a lab rat. And I definitely never expected one of my captors to risk everything to save me." Lyra sat beside him, close enough that their shoulders touched. I never expected to fall in love with one of our subjects either. The words hung in the air between them. Jake's heart hammered against his ribs. She'd said it so simply, like it was just a fact, undeniable as gravity. Lyra, we barely know each other. I know you were on your way to Mars when our ship intercepted your transport, she said quietly. I know you were going to be an engineer at the new colony. I know you have a sister named Claire who you miss desperately. I know you hate synthetic coffee but drink it anyway. I know you sing old Earth songs when you think no one can hear you. She turned to face him fully. I know that when they hurt you during the tests, you never screamed. You just close your eyes and go somewhere else in your mind. I know you're the strongest person I've ever met. Jake felt something crack open in his chest. They were going to kill me? Eventually. Once they'd learned everything they could. Lyra's voice was barely a whisper. I couldn't let that happen. I couldn't lose you before I even had the chance to know you outside those walls. He took her hand, marveling at how it fit in his despite the slight differences in proportion. So what now? Now we live, Lyra said, however we can. The next 3 days passed in a strange sort of domestic normalcy. They bought the contacts and suppressors. They found work, Jake fixing equipment at the docks, and Lyra using her scientific knowledge to help at a struggling medical clinic. They fell into routines, small and mundane and precious. At night they'd lie on that narrow bed, talking in the darkness. Lyra told him about Valen, her homeworld, a place of strict hierarchies and colder emotions. Jake told her about Earth, about blue skies and oceans, and the feeling of rain on your skin. What do I need to do to marry you? Lyra asked one night, the question coming out of nowhere. Jake propped himself up on one elbow, looking down at her in surprise. What? Marriage. It's a human custom, yes? A formal bond between partners. Her eyes, now disguised with brown contacts, still held that intense focus he'd come to know. I want that with you. What do I need to do? Jake's mouth went dry. That's not something you do because you feel obligated. Marriage is about love and commitment and I love you.
She interrupted.
I committed to you the moment I decided your life was worth more than mine. So what do I need to do? You don't need to do anything, Jake said softly. You already have my heart. You saved my life. You gave up everything for me. That's not enough. I want to be bound to you in the way your people recognize. I want everyone to know I'm yours and you're mine. There was an edge of desperation in her voice. Please, tell me what I need to do. Jake realized then that this wasn't just about marriage. This was about belonging. Lyra had severed every tie to her own people. She was adrift, and she needed an anchor. You don't have to prove anything to me, he said gently. But if you want to get married, we'll figure it out together. She pulled him down, kissing him with a fierce intensity that took his breath away. When they finally broke apart, she whispered against his lips, Together. I like that word. The peace shattered the next morning when Jake returned from the docks to find their apartment door open and Lyra gone. On the table sat a single item, a translator device of Valen make. Jake grabbed it, his blood running cold as he activated it. A message played, a male voice speaking in clipped tones. The traitor Lyra has been located. She will be returned to Valon space for judgment. The human is irrelevant. He may continue his pathetic existence here in the Outer Rim. Jake's hands shook with rage. They'd taken her. After everything they'd found them and taken her. He looked around the small apartment that had been their refuge, their first real home together. Then he grabbed his coat and headed for the door. He didn't care that he was just one human against an entire alien government. He didn't care about the odds or the danger. They'd taken the woman he loved, and he was going to get her back. Part 3, the information broker went by the name Dutch, though Jake doubted that was real. The man operated out of a bar in Haven's Edge's lower levels, a place where the air was thick with smoke and secrets. Jake found him in a back booth surrounded by data pads and looking bored. I need to find someone, Jake said without preamble. The Valans took her this morning. Dutch looked up, his cybernetic eye whirring as it focused. Valans don't usually bother with extractions out here. Must be important. She is. To me. Jake slapped his credit chip on the table. That's everything I have. Tell me where they'd take her. Dutch picked up the chip, scanned it, and whistled. Not much. But I like your determination. He pulled up a holographic display. Valen ships don't dock here. They'd have used a rendezvous point, probably transferred her to a bigger vessel. His fingers danced across the display. There. The Sovereign's Pride. Diplomatic cruiser that passed through the system 6 hours ago. Headed back to Veyland space. Jake's heart sank. How do I catch up to a diplomatic cruiser? You don't. Not unless you've got a fast ship and a death wish. But there's a station on the border, Threshold 9. All Veyland ships stop there for customs inspection before entering their space. It's neutral territory, jointly operated by 3 different species. Even diplomats have to follow protocol. How long until they reach it? 18 hours, maybe 20, depending on their route. Jake did the math. If he could get a ship, if he could get there before they cleared customs, he might have a chance. A slim one, but a chance. I need transport. Fast transport. Dutch studied him for a long moment. You really love her, don't you? The Veyland woman. More than anything. Stupid, Dutch said, but there was something almost admiring in his tone. There's a pilot, goes by Cassidy. She runs cargo out of Bay 7. Her ship's fast, and she's got a soft spot for lost causes. He stood up, pocketing the credit chip. Tell her Dutch sent you. You're probably going to die trying this. Probably, Jake agreed. But I have to try. Bay 7 smelled like fuel and hot metal. The ship sitting there was a modified courier vessel, all sleek lines and oversized engines. A woman with short red hair was doing a pre-flight check, cursing at a stubborn panel. You, Cassidy? Jake called out. She turned, wiping grease from her hands. Who's asking? Dutch sent me. I need to get to Threshold 9. Fast. Cassidy's eyes narrowed. Dutch doesn't send people my way unless they're running from something or running toward trouble.
Which is it?
The woman I love was kidnapped by the Veylands. They're taking her back to their space. I need to reach Threshold 9 before they clear customs. The Veylands don't kidnap. They extradite traitors. Cassidy crossed her arms. What did she do? Saved my life. Broke me out of one of their research facilities. Gave up everything for me. Jake met her gaze steadily. Now I'm going to return the favor. Cassidy was quiet for a moment. Then she laughed, sharp and bitter. You know how insane that sounds? One human against the Veyland government? Yes, I'm doing it anyway. She studied him, then shrugged. Your funeral. I can get you there in 16 hours if I push the engines. It'll cost you, though. I don't have any money. Dutch took it all. Of course he did. Cassidy sighed. Fine. You can work off the debt. I need a mechanic anyway, and you look like you know your way around an engine. She gestured to the ship. Get on board. We leave in 10 minutes. The journey to Threshold 9 was the longest 16 hours of Jake's life. Cassidy's ship, the Wayward Star, was fast, but temperamental. Jake spent most of the trip in the engine room, keeping the reactor stable while Cassidy pushed the vessel to its limits. During a brief rest period, Cassidy brought him coffee and sat across from him in the cramped galley. You got a plan for when we get there? Fine, Lyra. Get her off that ship. That's not a plan. That's a suicide wish with extra steps. Cassidy took a sip of her coffee. Threshold 9 is neutral territory. The Veylands can't just do whatever they want there. There are rules, procedures. You could file an appeal, claim she's seeking asylum. Would that work? Maybe. If you had time and a good lawyer and about 50,000 credits for bribes. She shook her head. Which you don't have. Jake rubbed his face, exhaustion pulling at him. Then I'll improvise. You're really going to die for this woman? If that's what it takes. He looked up. You ever love someone so much that the world doesn't make sense without them? Cassidy's expression softened. Once. Lost her to a syndicate raid 5 years ago. She stood up. Which is probably why I'm helping your dumb self. Get some rest. We'll be there in 6 hours. Jake tried to sleep but couldn't. His mind kept conjuring images of Lyra, alone and scared, heading back to a people who wanted to execute her. He thought about that night in their apartment when she'd asked what she needed to do to marry him. He should have said yes right then. Should have found someone to perform the ceremony, made it official. At least then she'd know, truly know, how much she meant to him. The Wayward Star dropped out of faster-than-light travel with a lurch that nearly sent Jake sprawling. He rushed to the cockpit where Cassidy was already scanning the station. Threshold 9 hung in space like a massive wheel, ships of all sizes docked at various points along its rim. The station was deliberately ugly, a clear message that function mattered more than form. In the distance, Jake could see a large vessel, elegant and streamlined in the Veyland style. That's the Sovereign's Pride, Cassidy confirmed. They're in Customs Bay 3. We've got maybe 2 hours before they're cleared to leave. Get me over there. Not that simple. We need clearance to dock, and Customs will want to inspect us.
That takes time.
Jake's hands clenched into fists. There has to be another way. Cassidy pulled up a schematic of the station. There's a service corridor that connects the bays. Maintenance uses it. If you could get inside the station, you could access it. She looked at him. But security is tight. They'll scan you, check your ID, the works. So I need a distraction. A big one. Cassidy grinned suddenly, and Jake realized she was enjoying this. Lucky for you, I happen to owe the station master here a favor. A really annoying favor? Give me 20 minutes to get us docked, and I'll give you your distraction. 20 hours later, Jake stood at the entrance to the service corridor, watching as alarms began blaring throughout the station. Cassidy's idea of a distraction involved a carefully timed reactor fluctuation in the wayward star that suggested a possible core breach. Every security officer on the station was now rushing toward their docking bay. Jake didn't waste time. He slipped into the corridor and started running toward Bay 3, toward Lyra, toward whatever came next. He didn't have a weapon, didn't have a plan beyond finding her, but he had something more important. He had love fierce and desperate and utterly reckless, and sometimes that was enough. Part 4. The service corridor was a maze of narrow passages and locked doors, but Jake had always been good with security systems. His engineering training came in handy as he bypassed locks and avoided the few remaining security cameras. The alarms were still blaring, Cassidy's false reactor breach keeping most of the station's attention focused elsewhere. Bay 3 loomed ahead. Through a maintenance viewport, Jake could see the Sovereign's Pride, its elegant hull gleaming under the station's lights. Violin crew members moved around the customs checkpoint, going through the motions of inspection with obvious impatience. Jake needed to get on that ship, but walking through the main entrance was suicide. He scanned the bay, looking for options. There, a cargo lift connecting to a lower level. If he could get down there, he might be able to access the ship through its cargo bay. He moved quickly, keeping to the shadows. The lift was unguarded, everyone focused on the customs procedures above. Jake slipped inside and descended, his heart pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. The cargo bay of the Sovereign's Pride was massive, filled with containers and equipment. Jake crept between them, searching for any sign of where they might be holding Lyra. A voice made him freeze. The prisoner is secure in detention cell 2. The captain wants to depart as soon as customs clears us. Understood. The traitor will face justice soon enough. 2 violent guards stood near the cargo bay entrance, their attention on their communication devices. Jake waited until they moved on, then headed deeper into the ship. He'd studied Valon vessel layouts during his captivity, one of the few benefits of being their prisoner. Detention cells would be on the security level, 2 decks up. He found a maintenance shaft and climbed, his arms burning from the effort. The ship hummed around him, systems preparing for departure. He was running out of time. The security level was more heavily guarded. Jake watched from the maintenance shaft as guards patrolled the corridor. There, down the hall, a door marked with Valen symbols he recognized. Detention. He needed a distraction. Jake looked around the shaft and found what he needed, an environmental control panel. He pulled it open and started crossing wires. 30 seconds later, the temperature in the security level dropped 20 degrees, and the lights began flickering. Guards rushed to investigate. Jake dropped from the shaft and ran to the detention door. The lock was biometric, designed for Valen physiology. He couldn't hack it, couldn't force it. But he could. Step away from that door, human. Jake turned to find a Valen officer pointing a weapon at him. The man's face was cold, contemptuous. You're trespassing on a diplomatic vessel. That's an act of war. I'm here for Lyra, Jake said, raising his hand slowly. Let her go. She doesn't deserve execution for saving someone's life. She betrayed her people. She released a valuable research subject and fled like a common criminal. The officer moved closer. You are that subject, I assume. How did you find us? Love finds a way, Jake said. And he meant it. Love. How human. We Valons do not afflict ourselves with such primitive emotions. No, you just afflict yourselves with cruelty instead.
The weapon pressed against Jake's chest.
Give me one reason not to kill you now, because you'll have to go through me first, a voice said from behind the officer. Lyra stood in the now open doorway, having somehow escaped her cell. She held a piece of broken equipment like a weapon. Her eyes, back to their natural violet without the contacts, blazed with fury. The officer spun, but Lyra was faster. She struck him across the temple, and he crumpled. Jake caught the weapon before it hit the floor. How did you... The environmental controls. The temperature drop disrupted the cell locks. Lyra grabbed his hand. I knew it was you. I knew you'd come. Alarms began blaring, different ones this time. Escaped prisoner, a mechanical voice announced. Security to detention level. They ran. Through corridors past startled crew members, following Jake's mental map of the ship back toward the cargo bay. Guards shouted behind them, weapons fire scorching the walls. There. Lyra pointed at an emergency escape pod. We can use that! They dove inside. Jake slammed the hatch shut and initiated the launch sequence. The pod fired, throwing them back against the seats as it blasted away from the Sovereign's pride. Through the viewport, Jake could see the massive ship beginning to turn, trying to target them. They'll shoot us down, Lyra said. Not in neutral territory. Threshold 9's defense systems won't allow it. Jake hoped he was right. The pod tumbled through space, its tiny engines no match for a diplomatic cruiser, but Jake was steering them toward the station, toward safety. Weapons locked onto them, but no one fired. The Valens couldn't risk an international incident by destroying the pod in neutral space. They crashed into one of Threshold 9's emergency docking bays, the pod's hull screaming in protest. Jake kicked the hatch open, pulling Lyra out just as station security arrived. Hold it right there, a security chief shouted, weapons drawn. Jake and Lyra stood together, hands raised. The chief, a stocky alien with too many eyes, looked between them and the Valen ship in the distance. This is going to be a paperwork nightmare, the chief muttered. You two come with me. We need statements. They're going to demand we hand her over, Jake said. Probably. But you're in neutral territory now. That means lawyers, hearings, the whole process. The chief gestured to her officers. Take them to the diplomatic processing center. And someone get me Ambassador Chen on the line. She loves this kind of mess. The processing center was a series of secure rooms where territorial disputes got sorted out. Jake and Lyra sat together, still holding hands, while officials from 3 different governments argued over what to do with them. Ambassador Chen, a human woman with steel-gray hair and sharp eyes, interviewed them separately. When it was Jake's turn, she sat across from him and said, "Tell me everything." He did. The abduction, the research facility, Lyra's rescue, their time on Haven's Edge, the recapture. All of it. Chen listened without interrupting. When he finished, she said, "The Valens are claiming she's a traitor. They want her extradited. She saved my life. That's not treason, that's humanity." Jake leaned forward. "Please, there has to be something we can do." "There might be." Chen tapped her fingers on the table. "If she were a human citizen, we could deny the extradition request. Claim jurisdiction." "She's not human." "No, but she could be married to one." Chen's eyes glinted. "Human law recognizes spousal protections. If you were married, she'd have certain rights, including the right to apply for citizenship. The process would take months, maybe years, long enough for this to blow over." Jake's breath caught. "Can we do that? Get married here?" "I'm authorized to perform marriages." Chen stood up. "But you need to be sure. This isn't just about love. This is about politics and law and consequences. If you do this, you're making an enemy of the Valen government." Jake didn't hesitate. "When can we do it? Give me 2 hours to file the paperwork. And kid?" Chen smiled slightly. "She's lucky to have you." Part 5, the ceremony took place in a small conference room on Threshold 9, witnessed by Ambassador Chen, Cassidy, and a few bemused station officials. Lyra wore the same clothes she'd been captured in, and Jake hadn't showered in 2 days. It wasn't the wedding either of them had imagined, but none of that mattered. "Do you, Jake Carter, take Lyra of Valen as your lawfully wedded spouse?" Chen asked. "I do," Jake said, looking into Lyra's eyes. "And do you, Lyra of Valen, take Jake Carter as your lawfully wedded spouse?" "I do." Lyra's voice was steady, certain. "What do I need to do to marry you, you ask me? I told you that I'd do anything."
You didn't have to do anything, Jake said softly.
"You already had me." Chen cleared her throat. "By the authority vested in me by the Human Alliance, I pronounce you married. You may kiss." They did, and it felt like a promise, like a beginning, like everything they'd fought for, crystallizing into this one perfect moment. When they broke apart, Cassidy was wiping her eyes, and even some of the officials looked moved. "Congratulations," Chen said. "Now comes the hard part." The hard part was dealing with the Valon diplomatic protests that flooded in over the next hour. Their ambassador, a stern woman named Karev, demanded Lyra's immediate extradition. Chen countered with spousal protection laws, human jurisdiction, and enough legal precedent to bury the Valens in paperwork for months. "This is an outrage," Karev declared during a tense meeting. "She is a traitor to her people. She is a human citizen's spouse, currently applying for citizenship herself," Chen replied coolly. "And she's under human protection. If you have charges to file them through proper channels. Otherwise, this discussion is over." Jake and Lyra watched from behind a one-way mirror as the two ambassadors faced off. "This isn't over," Lyra said quietly. "They won't give up." "Neither will we," Jake said, squeezing her hand. "We've come too far." The Valens eventually left, promising legal action and diplomatic consequences. Chen returned looking exhausted but satisfied. "They're furious, but their hands are tied. As long as you stay in human-controlled space, they can't touch you." "What about neutral territories?" Lyra asked. "Gray area. I'd avoid them for a while." Chen handed them a datapad. "Your citizenship application is filed. It'll take 6 months minimum, probably longer. Until then, you're in a legal limbo. Not quite a citizen, not quite not." "But married," Jake said. "Very married."
"I made sure of that,"
Chen smiled. "There's a transport leaving for Earth in 3 days. I've arranged passage for you both. You'll be safer there than out here." Earth. Jake hadn't been back in almost a year. The thought of showing Lyra his home world, of building a real life there, filled him with a hope he'd almost forgotten existed. They spent the next 3 days on Threshold 9, staying in a small apartment Chen had secured for them. It was nicer than their place on Haven's Edge, with actual windows showing the stars beyond. At night, they'd lie together and plan their future. "Tell me about Earth again," Lyra would say. "Tell me about the ocean." Jake would describe beaches and waves, the smell of salt air, the feeling of sand between your toes. Lyra would listen with an intensity that made his heart ache. She'd given up an entire world for him. He wanted to give her a new one in return. Cassidy visited on their last night. She brought a bottle of something alcoholic and dangerously orange. "Figured you could use this." They drank together, the three of them, toasting to unlikely rescues and reckless decisions. Cassidy told stories about her years hauling cargo through space, the close calls and narrow escapes. Jake and Lyra told her about their first meeting, the 3 weeks in the research facility that had changed everything. "You know what's crazy?" Cassidy said, her words slightly slurred. "A month ago, you two didn't know each other existed. Now you're married and on the run from an alien government? When you say it like that, it sounds insane," Jake admitted. "It is insane." Lyra leaned against him, "but I wouldn't change it." "Not even the part where you threw away your entire life?" Cassidy asked. "That wasn't a life. It was an existence. This is living." Lyra looked up at Jake. "He showed me what that means." The transport to Earth was a massive colony ship making a scheduled run. It carried families, workers, supplies, all the necessities of maintaining humanity's presence in space. Jake and Lyra boarded with forged credentials Chen had provided, listed as a married couple relocating for work. As the ship jumped to faster-than-light travel, Earth growing closer with each passing day, Jake stood at an observation deck with Lyra. She stared at the distorted stars, her hand in his. "Are you scared?" he asked. "Terrified?" she admitted. "Everything I know is gone. My people, my career, my world. I'm traveling to a planet I've only studied from afar, filled with billions of humans I don't understand." She turned to him. "But I'm also more excited than I've ever been, because I'm doing it with you." "Earth can be overwhelming," Jake warned. "It's crowded and chaotic, and nothing like Valen." "Good. Valen was cold and ordered and lonely," Lyra smiled. "I want chaotic. I want overwhelming. I want to feel alive." The journey took 2 weeks. Jake used the time to teach Lyra about Earth culture, customs, things that would help her fit in. She absorbed it all with the same intense focus she'd shown in the research facility, but now she was learning for herself, not for some sterile scientific purpose. When Earth finally appeared in the view screen, a blue and white marble hanging in the black, Lyra gasped. "It's beautiful." "It's home," Jake said. "Our home now." They landed at the Singapore spaceport, joining the crowds of arrivals. Immigration scanned their documents, raised eyebrows at Lyra's obvious alien features, but Chen's credentials held. They were waved through. Outside the spaceport, Earth assaulted the senses. The smell of vegetation and pollution, the sound of thousands of voices, the heat and humidity of tropical air. Lyra stumbled, overwhelmed, and Jake caught her. "Too much?" he asked. "Perfect." She breathed deep, taking it all in. This is what you tried to describe. This is what I was missing. They found a small apartment in the city, paid for with what little credit they had left. It wasn't much, a couple of rooms in a building that had seen better days, but it was theirs. No one hunting them, no one demanding they justify their existence.
Just two people building a life together. Jake found work as an engineer at a local firm.
Lyra started studying human medicine, her scientific background translating surprisingly well. Months passed. The citizenship paperwork crawled forward. Sometimes they heard rumors of Veyland diplomatic pressure, but Earth was big and bureaucratic enough that one alien woman married to a human wasn't worth the political capital of a major incident. One evening, 6 months after arriving on Earth, Jake came home to find Lyra on their tiny balcony, watching the sunset. He joined her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked quietly. "Giving up everything?" Lyra turned in his arms. "You asked me once what I needed to do to marry you. I said I'd do anything. You told me I already had your heart." She touched his face gently. "I didn't understand then, but I do now. Love isn't about what you need to do. It's about choosing each other every day, no matter the cost. Even when the cost is everything? Especially then." She kissed him softly. "I lost a world, Jake, but I gained you. That's not a sacrifice. That's the best trade I ever made." They stood together as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. Behind them, the apartment was small and shabby. Around them, a city of millions went about their lives. Above them, somewhere in the vast darkness of space, Lyra's people probably still searched for her. But none of that mattered. They had each other. They had their love, fierce and reckless and utterly worth it. They had a future they were building together one day at a time. Jake pulled out a small box from his pocket. "I know we're already married, but I wanted to do this properly." He opened it to reveal a simple ring. "What do I need to do to show you how much I love you?" Lyra laughed, tears streaming down her face. "You already have. Every single day." She took the ring, sliding it onto her finger. "But I'll take this anyway." They kissed as the last light faded from the sky. Two souls from different worlds who had found each other against impossible odds. The galaxy was vast and often cruel, but in that moment, standing on a balcony on Earth with the woman he loved, Jake Carter knew one thing for certain. Sometimes the most human thing you could do was love someone with everything you had. Consequences be damned. And sometimes, just sometimes, that was enough to change everything.